clubs. Oh yeah. But I have to say Dave's budgets, they're fabulous. I just love them.
Yeah, Dave's shirts are really coming along.
I get emotional after I do budget presentations.
As do I.
I try to hold it
The
back.
emotion is palpable. We can see it.
Yeah.
I love a good budget presentation.
It's going to be a long cabinet meeting tomorrow.
Okay, why don't we get started? I think we are up to 16 people in the room.
Yep.
So, Mr. Irving, can you pull up the presentation?
Yep. Okay, there you go.
Well, thank you. So we have some information that we want to share with you tonight. I want to thank you for your participation in this process as we finish. This is going to be our third meeting with our stakeholder group. I appreciate the work of the Beyond Education group for assisting us in working through this process, as well as my co-presenter, Mr. Irving, and Hannah Brake for assisting us with preparing of information and sharing information with you all. Dr. Hansen, is there anything you'd like to share before we get started?
Just a few words. Thank you, Dave, and thank you to everyone who's participating in our foundation analysis, and we're really excited about this work. As part of our strategic plan, under focus area 4.0, efficient use of fiscal capital, one of our primary areas is developing partnerships with the community, and developing a foundation is right on that list of reaching out, developing good relationships with our community and our businesses so that we partner together to do the best we can for public education in Orange Unified School District. So I want to thank Dave for leading this effort. I am part of his fan club too, and I'm glad that, you know, even though this is something new in terms of facilitating a process around developing this, I'm really pleased that we have such great participation and appreciate all of you that are giving input to the process so we can ensure it's successful. So thank you for being here. I think this is our third meeting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you about some of your ideas and getting additional support from our partner, Beyond Education.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen. Mr. Irvin, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Irvin, please.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the follow-up. So during our last meeting, we talked about enrichment programming. And in the email that I sent out, I kind of went through all of our school sites to see who was offering these after-school enrichment opportunities, mostly with outside vendors on a pay-for basis, where parents basically directly pay some of these outside vendors. And I included this information in the initial email that we sent out about this evening. So you have it in an Excel document. But you can see here, these were the Orange Unified School District schools with some type of after-school fee-based enrichment program. So that included Anaheim Hills, Canyon Rim, Chapman Hills, Crescent, Fletcher, Imperial, La Vita, Lamson, Linda Vista, McPherson, Knoll Canyon, Panorama, Running Springs, Serrano, and Villa Park Elementary Schools. When we kind of asked the schools what enrichment programs they were offering, and I know this was also one of the questions we had asked, what do you think the community would pay for? We saw a myriad of opportunities out there, from STEM to art, and some very unique programming. So these are just some examples. We had Mad Science at several of our schools, which is an outside vendor. Chess, there's multiple vendors that are providing chess after school. Literacy on Stage, that's a program that's offered at many of our programs. Bricks for Kids, Dance Corner, Brain Builders, Jewelry Design. We have Spanish and Mandarin courses, golf, tennis, music, cooking, coding, art, magic, Great Clay Adventures, Comic Creators, and Robotics. So again, those aren't offered at every program, but they're offered somewhere in those schools that I just reviewed. And then we also had some schools that don't have those outside fee-based programs where the parents are paying the outside vendor directly. And these are primarily our Title I schools. So you'll see the little asterisk next to them if they're Title I. So that includes California, Cambridge, Esplanade, Fairhaven, Handy, Jordan Academy, Olive, Palmyra, Prospect, Sycamore, Taft, West Orange, and then all of our middle schools, Saravilla Middle School, Portola, and Yorba Middle Schools. And I also didn't get any information on the high schools for those types of programs as well. So it's pretty much all of our secondary programs. Now, this doesn't mean they don't have outside programs. So a lot of our Title I schools do have after-school programming. They're just not fee-based that would generally be paid for directly by the parents. So in some cases, they're using Title I funds to bring the chess club onto the campus after school. But the question that I was trying to delve into is who has a program right now that is fee-based where parents are paying directly to those outside vendors.
Yeah, what I would like to add to this is we look at the volume of activity and interactions with our school site. We don't have, so through the use of facilities under the Civic Center Act is that we'll get a use of facility for one of the vendors to use a classroom for a defined period of time. There's a nominal fee that is paid for the use of the classroom. But in terms of the revenue and all the monies that are generated, we don't have information to that, neither does the school. But based off the volume and the extensiveness of the programs, we believe that if we were to add all the revenues that are being collected at the school site, it's going to be well over $100,000. And it wouldn't surprise me that if you see several hundreds of $1,000s being collected by these vendors to serve our kids and some pay, extracurricular payment.
Absolutely, and something, and we'll talk a little bit more about it too, is because of the way we are currently doing this, the vendor has a sole responsibility for the insurance. So if we were to be able to run some of these programs under a foundation, under the umbrella of the foundation, they could use the insurance from the foundation, which would then bring their costs down, which would increase the amount of revenue coming in for the foundation as well. And I know that's something as a principal I had experienced. We lost programming due to the fact that some of the insurance has gone up substantially, especially we have to have a molestation rider and some other kinds of insurance. And those were causing a lot of these small fee-based programs they're not able to continue. So having that umbrella for a foundation to run these types of programs would probably increase the availability and would lower their costs as well.
At the end of each section, we're going to ask if there's any questions, but before we move on, I see in the chat that there's a couple questions. It seems like we have some technology issues.
Oops.
Mrs. Jones is asking for a list of schools that offer after-school programs, whether it's fee-based or not. So what we can do is we can send you a list after this meeting of that. And I see that there's some of our guests have lost temporarily that they can't join the chat room. Is anyone having any problems with the chat room or being able to read the chat room? So I see that we have one person who has their hand raised.
Let me go out. Let's see. Oh, it looks like Chris has her hand raised.
Yeah, Mrs. Erickson?
Yeah, hi. When you sent this list out, I was actually really surprised. And as a board member, I probably shouldn't have been as surprised. But I know this is just a list of fee-based programs and that we do have programming in the Title I schools. But even amongst the ones that are here that have fee-based programs, it's really clear that there's some that have a ton of programming and some that have just maybe one program. do you have any idea without, I know you have to go back and look at the Title I school programs, but what would be your, I guess, best guess, if you have an educated guess, on whether or not those schools are, have much programming in terms of, using their Title I funds or not? Because it is concerning when you see, like Lamson has one soccer program, but then you look at Anaheim Hills and they've got a whole list of all sorts of programs they can run.
Well, I do know, so we have, first of all, the Title I schools have a program called ACES. And ACES is an after-school program that provides a lot of enrichment opportunities to the students. So they bring in sports programming, they bring in STEM activities. So it's a coordinated effort to bring in those programs to our after school. So I know Yorba, Portola, and all of our Title I elementary schools have the ACES program. So it's not something that parents pay for, and therefore we wouldn't need to be looking at scholarshiping for if this was to move forward. But there are a lot of enrichment opportunities offered through that programming. Then we also have some Title I schools that, like I know Palmyra was one that they contract with the chess group individually to bring them in and do some after school enrichment. And so we have several Title I schools that are doing that as well.
So for schools like Olive and Levita that are not Title I schools, so they have no Title I funds, and yet they have a high rate of poverty, but they may not be Title I. I mean, they're getting, Olive has nothing, it looks like. And they're just kind of stuck in the middle, right?
They're kind of, well, and again, we're looking at these fee-based enrichment programs. So they have, we have CARES, we have those types of programs after school, but on these individually fee-based programs. So for example, chess club, they might meet only Thursdays after school for an hour. So it's not really after school care as much as it is an enrichment program. So they haven't set up those channels yet. And they may have in the past. And a lot of this information I was collecting now, we're in the middle of COVID, so a lot of these have expired and they're not really doing these after school programs now. So they're going off of their best recollection from the past. And in a lot of the cases too, it's teachers and sometimes even parent groups are helping coordinate some of these enrichment opportunities, because it's definitely time intensive to go through. You need to go through those insurance contracts. You need to get them sent to the community or the ed services department to go through it, the facilities use. So there's a lot of steps that go along with it. So smaller schools do struggle with that. I know, coming from a large elementary middle school, my assistant principal was kind of like doing a lot of that work. But for some of our smaller sites, they have to really find a way to delegate that work.
And I think we have some more information to share with the group of what experiences the Irvine Public School Foundation experiences. So why don't we, if we can go on to the next slides, Mr. Irvin?
Yeah, I'm pulling that up. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Yeah, so I don't know if Cheryl, if you'd like to talk about some of this. What are some of the benefits or drawbacks of wrapping these programs under a foundation? I think I kind of touched on a couple of those. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. Cheryl, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm going to be talking about the benefits actually of wrapping any kind of after-school programming into a foundation. What this does is it provides the ability for there to be programming at all schools. And for instance, IPSF, we actually have coordinators at some of our school sites, which are parents, and we work closely with them in helping select classes so that they have a say-so in what the classes are, but that is not, they don't enter into any kind of contracts or any kind of thing with the vendors themselves, with the teachers. And so by a foundation being able to provide and be the one that's offering all these programs, you're able to have programming at potentially every school, because you can coordinate internally those programs at the schools that don't necessarily have a parent volunteer to help with that, which from talking to some people, I think that that might be one of the issues at some of the Title I schools is parents don't feel capable or that they're wanted or things like that. And so they may be hesitant to step up to help for some kind of program like this. But by being able to do it internally from a foundation, you can handle that at the schools that don't have parent support. For economies of scale, basically we have consistent pricing, one contract per vendor, one price for parents. So that means that at one school, the price is the same as it is at a different school. In the past, when we didn't have this type of foundation here in Irvine, we had vendors that would charge a higher amount at certain schools than at other schools. And parents would be frustrated in that the costs were not identical or the same, and that why do we have to pay more when others don't? So that's something that we can do. We can also, by having economies of scale, say to a vendor, we can't, as a foundation, charge more than you charge directly because we don't want to compete with you. And so because we're offering them so many more classes, because we're offering them more schools, then we're able to negotiate a price with that vendor to help keep costs lower. And then we are in turn able to add our expenses on top of that, which then makes the price about the same as that they would charge somewhere else. Supplementing instructional programs. An example of that is we have an instrument rental program. We rent instruments to families for students that have music in grades 4 through 6. And then from the proceeds from that program, we fund K through music. So it's using programming that you already have to supplement programming that is going on during the daytime, during the school day. I'm going to cover the covering operational costs when I talk about the next slide. So please give me a minute on that one. And then for the sustainability, what happens when you are not running a program through a foundation, and I've experienced this myself as a parent, when the parents move on, you sometimes lose that institutional knowledge, you lose that workforce, you lose programs at times because the parents, their children have graduated and they've moved on either to a new school or out of the district entirely. And so being able to have a foundation run after school programs or any type of programming like that, it is beneficial in that you have consistency. Okay. Can you switch to the next slide, please, Joe? So I just want to share a little bit just about two of our programs that we have. And this is where I will actually get into the operational costs. So for our after school program, this was pre-COVID, by the way. This was in 2019. We had, for our after school program, we had 7,500 enrollments and we had $1 million in gross revenue. Now, in our district, programs are not actually meant to raise funds. They are meant to serve our community. However, for these after school programs and for that gross revenue for after school, this particular program is actually revenue neutral, which means it doesn't make a profit, so to speak, which means that isn't part of a donation to the school district. What it does do is it provides operational costs to help cover those expenses for our foundation as a whole, and other expenses for covering the cost of the vendor or the teacher, which is the most expensive part of covering any program. And so this particular program itself is revenue neutral, but it covers operational expenses, right? That helps you be able to run your overall foundation. Our summer school program, on the other hand, in 2019, we had 10,000 enrollments, 2.8 million gross revenue, but our net revenue was $250,000. So we still took operational expenses out of the summer expenses because those are real costs. Your insurance, your rent, your staff, all of those are real expenses that have to come out of the revenue for that program. the 250,000 we had in profit, then those funds are able to be donated back to the school district as part of our overall donation, which covers expenses in our case of things like mental health support or instructional assistance and those types of things. So those are some of the reasons that it helps having programs as part of a foundation, is that you can help cover expenses for your foundation and also create a revenue source for the items you want to help support the school district with.
Cheryl, if I can add in one piece,
Of
is
course.
one of those operational costs that IPSF has made as a foundation is in providing scholarship funding built into program costs. So by charging a fee, we build in the amount of programming that we can provide to scholarships so that we can serve those students that have financial need as well.
So I see that we have a question from Nicole Jones.
Yes, I was wondering how wrapping the enrichment under the foundation complements or replaces the program that we have under that ACES program that Mr. Irvin mentioned. How would that work?
Well, from a programmatic standpoint, ACES is like it's almost like CARES. So if we have students in our CARES program now that are involved in those enrichment opportunities. So they actually leave CARES to go to the enrichment opportunity and then come back to CARES after it's done. So for example, if I'm in chess club on Thursdays, I would leave CARES, go to chess, and then come back. So in the same respect, we would be able to do a very similar opportunity with ACES, where if they were in an enrichment opportunity, let's say they were doing chess or something, they could leave the ACES program and come back after the enrichment opportunity is completed.
Okay, so with the foundation, like, guess I'm just a little unclear on how ACES works. Like, is that, like, would the foundation then be paying for the ACES program, or does the ACES money go into the foundation, or like, how does that?
So there's an application that was filed by the district for the ACES grant. It was under the tobacco tax. So there's an amount that we get for approximately 85 students. So if we let's say we have 100 kids that need to be served, then the foundation through funding could provide services for more kids, because there are needs than what the grant allows for. There are
Okay, so
greater
there's-
needs than what the grant provides.
Okay, so there are children who are not being served then under the ACES because we only have funding for so many.
Correct.
So this would be a good complement to that.
There's a limited number of slots under the grant that you need to provide services for. So this would be providing services for the additional students on the waiting list.
Perfect. Thank you. I just wasn't clear on that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cheryl, just because I want to make sure everyone that's here understands. So the programs that are enrichment, these after school and summer programs, again, they pay for a lot of your operating expenses as a foundation. And then any money you make goes back into the school day programs, such as the mental health programming or the VAPA during the school day.
That is correct. Keegan, any additional comments to that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
Mrs. Jones, you have another question?
On that. Can I clarify that? So when you say it goes to, say, mental health funding or whatever, is that the foundation earmarks it for mental health funding, or when the district gets it, that's what they spend it on? Or I'm not clear how that is delineated.
So
That's delineated for us. That's delineated as part of our MOU with the district. So as part of funding priorities that are determined each year in partnership with the foundation and the district. So no funds are earmarked. The only funds programming wise that are in that respect is our instrument rental is earmarked for music education. But outside of that, other funding is flexible funding. That's not donor restricted, of course.
Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, Mr. Irvin.
Okay. So prior to the meeting, in the email leading up to this meeting, we talked about coming up with some ideas for mission and vision brainstorming. So really, today we're not setting a mission or a vision for the foundation. That's something that will take a lot of time, and will be those stakeholders will be running that type of stakeholder engagement. What we want to provide to them as they move forward is just what are some of the most important elements that you see that should be incorporated into a possible mission and vision as this stakeholder group moves forward. So again, in no way are we creating a mission or vision. We're just trying to get some of those elemental ideas so that maybe they can use those as they move forward in that stakeholder engagement. So Keegan, I know you put this slide together. Did you want to review this?
Sure. I mean, I think many of you have most likely participated in either creating mission statements and vision statements before, so I don't want to, but really kind of the key differentiator between the two really is the mission is the here and now, the core purpose for the organization, and those key elements of why, what is the cause being focused, what are the actions, and what is the ultimate impact, what are the changes for better. So I know Joe did send a couple of examples. Here are a couple more. Probably well versed with American Red Cross, prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Ours at IPSF is to enrich the educational experience of each child in every school. We achieve this by providing programs, raising funds, and uniting the community in support of educational excellence. So really just those as examples, and those that Joe sent out from Tustin and Fullerton as other examples. Really wanted to spend some time to glean from the collective minds we have to what are some key phrases, what are some key words, themes that you think would add to be part of a potential mission for OUPSF.
Is there any strong opinions of anything that you've seen that draws your attention that you think is important for, our foundation to consider?
Okay. We have Nicole Jones put into the chat that equity should be part of the mission.
I like what Mr. Irvin put out as the Fullerton sample of each child, the experience of each child, and that kind of goes with what Nicole was saying too, of each child in the district, in words like that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Yeah, community support around public education. That's from Chris Erickson.
I see Mrs. Layton has raised her hand.
Yes, on piggybacking on the community, I like on the Fullertons the generosity of community support, because I believe our Orange community is so supportive. I've seen it through what we went through with during the COVID-19 with the oranges all around our city. People generously gave money to support the farmers, the local businesses, programs that normally continue, but we had to halt and they continued. I know the Foundation of Orange, they continued to scholarship many students to still be in different programs. So I really believe that our community is very generous when it comes to others in need, and especially our students in our schools. So I like the word generosity. Thank you.
Those are some, you make some very good points.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Layton. I do know that from our last homework, something that came out in several comments was this idea of bridging the community or bringing the community together. So I definitely, all those elements that you were just talking about, I feel like it's something that definitely came out in the homework.
I see Mrs. Yamasaki is typing in a message.
So creating unity in the district between our schools. I like that idea of bridging and creating unity and equity between all.
Why don't we give it another minute or so before we move on to the next section? Any further thoughts? Mrs. Erickson?
I hesitate to get too involved because obviously I'm not going to be a member of the Public Schools Foundation, but I do know just as a board member and as a community member as well, I mean, that really is sort of what I would, and having been on the previous foundation, that is sort of this idea of really bringing that generosity and building those bridges and really creating an atmosphere where the community is proud of Orange Unified. And sort of that idea, because I don't know what that feedback is, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's that idea of sort of building this bridge between us and the community, and the community being proud of Orange Unified and wanting to show us off, sort of thing. I like that idea with this communication and the generosity and the building the bridges, kind of that all coming together. So that's
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. I think building the communication is going to be key in that as well.
Mr. Irvin, why don't we go on to the next section?
Okay. So we got our key words or phrases that could be incorporated into the mission. I'll share those notes with our Beyond Education partners. And then some of these key ideas are going to be carried over into the vision. A vision statement describes the desired future position of the organization. So if we were looking at 5 years in the future, what could the Public School Foundation for Orange be doing at that time? So that's what that vision statement would kind of look at. So I don't know if we wanted to collect additional comments on that, Mr. Rivera, or.
Yeah, is there, Cheryl, is there any other thoughts that you would like to gather as you prepare the reports in this section, or should we?
I think really just thinking of it, if there's any other themes, thinking from a truly aspirational viewpoint, right? Vision necessarily doesn't have to be even 5 years down the road. Kind of many ways, and one way that we have thought about it at IPSF is what we call a "we believe" statement. So what we believe to be true when our work is ultimately successful, and I can share ours. We believe that every student deserves an educational experience complete with access to music, art, and science programs, both during the school day and outside of the classroom. With community support and investment, together we can provide enrichment opportunities for our children that will help foster the next generation of thinkers, innovators, and creators. So again, not so much about the what, more about the inspiration, the kind of aspirational vision. And again, just if this sparks any other ideas that we want to make sure we just jot down to incorporate as a starting point for this work.
Mrs. Erickson, do you have your hand up? Okay. So is there any thoughts from the group in this area?
I'll give one thought real quick. Just being on the elementary level and then having experience at the middle and high school. Middle and high school now have the CTE opportunities, and middle school is beginning to have that. And at the elementary level, if we're able to have programs across the district for all students, we would, I think, see an increase of the interest at, when they get to middle school and high school on things that they are able to participate in at the elementary level. So kind of what Keegan was saying is giving that opportunity. Looking 5 years down the road, having those opportunities for our elementary students to have access when they get to middle school and high school. They can have an idea of different skills that they'd like to really participate in. So I think at the elementary level, I think it's really big giving that opportunity for the students.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you for those sound comments.
And I think those ideas, like Jeff just said, are critical. And I think if we can tie them around our characteristics that we identified already as a community that we want for our graduates, based on our graduate profile, and they're tied into that, I think it makes it more cohesive and more relevant.
Thank you, Mrs. Corella. So, Mr. Irvin, can we move on to the next section?
Yep. Let's see. Okay, so we got our comments about the vision and mission elements. So we'll pass those on to Beyond Education for the feasibility study. Section 4 today covers the foundation's governance structure. So one of the questions we asked early on is, what does this look like for Irvine Public School Foundation? And Keegan was able to provide us, and Keegan and Cheryl were able to provide us with this document, which kind of shows how their IPSF structure looks. So I didn't know if Keegan or Cheryl would like to talk a little bit more about this.
Sure, I'm happy to. So this really kind of from a macro stand really shows multiple levels of opportunity and need really for community buy-in and volunteer service and leadership. So really kind of starting at the bottom and working up to on the Board of Trustees. So we have both community and corporate volunteers. Many of these opportunities are one-time opportunities, really as an entree, as a way to engage both our corporate partners in both team-based environments as well as individuals. So this looks like everything from assisting with after-school programs, helping us with our community and fundraising events, something that makes a lot of sense, and you're probably well familiar with at school-based activities as well. One group that we intentionally created to really make sure that we had equal and well representation from all schools is our ambassadors group. That group has one representative from each district school. So we have 41 different schools that have either one or two representatives. Those play a critical role that really liaise between the foundation and their respective school. It's a two-way conversation. They help us really strategize about what is needed at their schools, as well as as we're adopting and rolling out programs or rolling out initiatives, they help kind of be that spokesperson, that voice for their school community, and helps really keep those lines of communication open. The advisory council is really mostly made up of business and community leaders. This is a less formal opportunity than some of our standing committees and our board of trustees. It's often a first start for a leader that has either been identified or has been self-identified as a way to provide strategic guidance on some new initiatives. Our advisory council doesn't have standing meetings. It really is that advisory volunteer group that is key to making new relationships, new introductions for the foundation, and really advise us as we're working through our strategic plan and different strategic initiatives to really give us sound advice in their lines of industry and expertise. If you roll up from that, we have our standing committees. So our advisory council, just from a scope perspective, our ambassadors, like I said, is about 40 to 50 individuals. Our advisory council is everywhere between 10 to 25 individuals. Quite honestly, it can be a much larger group because it doesn't have as much of a formal structure, and it really allows you to have kind of broad outreach into the community. Our standing committees support our governance work for the organization, but we do allow to have both board and non-board members sit on our standing committees. It's also a great kind of testing ground for those that might have either self-identified or been nominated to potentially serve as a future board of trustee. And those really focus on those key areas. So whether it be our programs, our financials, our research development and fundraising efforts, looking at each of those key strategies and providing both advice as well as being ambassadors and mouthpieces into their respective hubs of influence for the foundation. And then that all rolls up into our board of trustees, which is between 15 to 30 members, according to our bylaws. And though, again, our board of trustees really does have a sound governance role and responsibility. It is a significant both of time, talent, and treasure. There is responsibilities from fiscal responsibility, oversight, recruitment of the chief executive, as well as evaluation, and really that ethical and legal oversight for the organization. So that just kind of provides the levels of both opportunities and roles as a nonprofit's evolves in what their needs are. I would say, looking at it from more of a startup or reimagining, naturally, I would think a clear place to be thinking about kind of building that pool would be in those kind of both of the ambassador group as well as that advisory group, because both of those are wonderful communication portals as well as kind of testing grounds to really get to know your key volunteers as you're thinking about potentially nominating them for a more significant both role of time and thinking about really diversity of perspective and making sure you're getting the right volunteers into the right roles. Cheryl, is there anything that you would add to that?
No, I think that was great. I mean, I know, maybe one thing that the board of trustees is, and even on our standing committees, it's great to have representation from different walks of life or different industry. So, I mean, when we started out, we had representative, maybe an attorney, or we had someone that knew about PR, you know, things that they can lend their skill sets to the foundation to help get started. That's always a plus as well, but it's not a requirement.
Is there any questions or clarifying questions or more information you would like to know about the structure before we move off of the subject? Mrs. Erickson?
Just from a practical standpoint, for somebody that's on this call that's thinking they want to get involved, when you're talking about recruiting all these people, because from what you're talking about, it's a little intimidating because it sounds like there's maybe, you know, 100 or more volunteers and different things going on. But, you know, we may start with, you know, 4 or 5 people. So are those 4 or 5 people going to start as the governing board and then build from there? Or so, you know, let's say Amy Case would decide to do this, and does she go on and just she and Nicole Jones are going to do it, and one of them decide they're president and the other's vice president, and then start recruiting from there? Is that how you would, just from a practical standpoint, sort of start up?
Yeah, I think it'd be twofold. I mean, there's no one right way to do it, but certainly I think I know we had some previous conversations, and one of the kind of assignments was thinking about those you might invite, and I think without thinking about what role they would, where their interest lies, what would the expectations of that service be? I think that's where I would encourage kind of the ambassadorship, right? Really creating kind of your sound group of ambassadors and then as you're thinking and building those relationships, if they don't already exist, for some that might be on this call or some that you might have close relationships with, that might be identified and understanding of what a governing role would be. Does that make sense? So, because I said some of these don't need formalization. So like an advisory council, someone that you might think about nominating for a potential board of trustee, it might be a great fit, but doesn't have the time or service, already serving on multiple other boards, can still serve as an advisor. So there's still opportunities for that person.
Well, I guess I'm asking more just from the seedling stage, because we're starting at the seedling stage. You know, we may only have 5 or 6 people. So when you're talking about recruiting and you're talking about 1 or 2 people or 3 people that are going to be doing this potentially. I mean, maybe we have, you know, 6 or 7 people, let's just say, but you know, they're really starting from the beginning. So when you talk about like recruitment and all that kind of stuff, they may just have the challenge of just establishing that core group first. And so what is that core group called for those that want to start it? Is that core group called, what are they? Are they now the advisory committee? Are they now the board of governors? What are they? So for those people that want to start it, what are they going to be?
They would be, I mean, the organization will need a board of directors or board of trustees as its initial body, right? Its initial decision-making body. It will need that for legal reason. I mean, Ron can lend his expertise here, but it will need that starting group. And then as that group is forming, I think at the same time, right, those that might not serve in that type of capacity, there could be an effort to build that kind of parent ambassador kind of larger representation group, right? I think those could happen simultaneously. That wouldn't be 2 people kind of feeling like they have to recruit 100 volunteers. I agree. It does sound like an overwhelming effort, and that's not the goal. I think the goal is to understand that there's multiple levels of opportunity based on what the decisions of what the direction the foundation is going to start with, right? If it's going to start with really reaching out as a fundraising arm, that's going to need specific skill sets and specific volunteers to help aid in that effort. If it's going to start on trying to build community volunteers to build after school programs, that's going to take, other skill sets and other volunteers to help aid in that efforts. So I think once some of those early decisions are made about kind of initial direction, it'll help advise on who some of those kind of key community stakeholders and volunteers may be.
I see that we have a question from Amy Case about ambassador group. Mrs. Case?
Hello, I just wanted to know how often your ambassador group meets on an annual basis. I missed that.
Regularly, it meets quarterly as an entire group.
Okay.
There's monthly group communications. So like I said, they became the communication portal. A lot of that happens through digital communication. But we have ongoing kind of one-off conversations with our ambassadors because they do become that kind of other arm for us. But really kind of formality, there is only kind of like quarterly group meetings.
Thank you.
Mr. Irvin, how many names were submitted from the stakeholder group as potentially people of interest that would serve in some capacity in the formation of the foundation or the operation of the foundation?
So from the last homework, after our previous meeting, I think I had 7 people, but some of them are on this call. So they were self-nominated. And then I think I had 2 outside of this group that were kind of nominated.
I would think
so.
that would be
why don't we send?
I was just going to say, I think that would be a good number if they're interested in serving on a board of directors to get things started.
So, and people, Mr. Winkart, people can wear many hats as the group starts forming, and then as the group starts growing, then they can, different positions, different people can come in, and then certain people can serve in one capacity rather than serving in many capacities, correct?
Yes. Of that group, some may want to serve on the board of directors, some may not have the time or interest, but they might be able to serve in other capacities. As Keegan mentioned, they could maybe serve on an advisory committee or work on fundraising projects or work on, development of programs. So, as many people as you can get to start up the group. Some of them will serve on the board of directors and some will want to do other things. You just have to kind of see how it evolves, I think.
And yes, so Michelle asked if we were going to send a survey. I thought after this meeting, once we kind of heard more about all of the opportunities, I was going to send out that survey again with some more delineated options in there to see if you have any specific people that would be interested in any of those various roles.
So from a recruitment standpoint, if you're talking to somebody and you say, look, we're starting to throw around this idea of forming a foundation, we'd love to have your input in that. You're not committed necessarily to being on the board of governors, but we would love to have you involved because you've been somebody that's been, involved in the schools and been an organizer and all of that. That's how these people might reach out to other people just to get that initial group together. That, as Mr. Winkert said, may or may not serve on the board of governors or board of trustees, whatever they are. But that they're just in that initial group to sort of start forming the mission, forming the vision, doing all that, and then eventually settling into whatever roles they want. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. Is there any more clarity that we can provide on this subject matter before we move on?
I'm afraid
Few
to talk
minutes.
because I've got a dog going on. But I was going to say I told Joe that I would be in any capacity he felt he needed me to be in, and I spoke with someone yesterday. I don't know if anyone's suggested Kim Lee from the Music Conservatory, but she said she'd be very interested. She's on the board for the Community Foundation of Orange. I think that's what it is. And she's very active in Chamber of Commerce and with this and the businesses. So she would be interested in if you needed her help in any capacity. So I was starting to type that, and then I thought it's taken too long. So thank you.
Well, definitely, I'll send out that survey. So I wrote down her name, but if you would include it with an email, that would be great.
Oh, I absolutely will, because I'm involved with the music program that she has, and she would be an asset. So whatever you need me to do, Joe, I'll do. Okay.
So I think, Joe, once you send out the survey, maybe if we can get responses back, let's say within a week, then
Absolutely.
we can finalize this list and hand it over to Beyond Ed. So that way we can finalize this section.
Okay. I will get that out tomorrow along with the recording from this evening too. So I know there are several people that could not attend tonight, but they'll have the recording so then they can give their input as well.
Okay.
Okay. With that, I think the last thing we had was kind of where we are in this process. Oops. Do that, sorry. So this is the summary of work that we have gone through towards the feasibility study. Mr. Rivera, did you want me to review that or?
Yeah, so why don't we just tag team
Okay.
on the slide. So as we started this ventures, we have spent, better part of 5 or 6 hours together reviewing information, asking questions, being informed on what does it take to create a foundation and the benefits of a foundation. Beyond Ed has also reached out and has conducted interviews, and I'll let them speak as to the interviews that they've had and what other information they've gathered up and what type of data they've gathered, so that way you can be informed and at least knowledgeable of what has been collected behind the scenes. So I think overall, there's been a great deal of work that has been prepared or that has been gathered for these meetings and this engagement. And I want to also express my appreciation for your commitment from your busy schedules to participate in this process and have an open conversation and really hear from you what your thoughts are about the viability, which is really the purpose. So I want to express on behalf of the district my appreciation for your commitment to this process and being candid with your comments about, what are the challenges and what's your thoughts. So Keegan and Cheryl, is there anything you want to share with us? Or can you please share with us what you've been collecting and some of the background work that you've been doing in preparation for the feasibility study?
Sure. We, all the different items that were listed there are a lot of hours have gone into preparing and doing research. A lot of the information that we've researched and found we will provide in the feasibility study itself. But I was able to meet with several individuals. Most of you are on the call. It was very much a pleasure of mine to get to know you better and to learn more about your amazing city and about your great school district and the things that you have at your schools. I just really enjoyed that. So gleaning a lot of information that will relate to the objectives that are on the MOU that we have. All of those things will be included in the report that we provide. The interviews with key Beyond Ed staff members, just need you to know that Keegan and I are not the only two staff that you are getting access to. I did talk to many of our staff members to get their specific thoughts and ideas and information that they know because they work directly in those areas. For instance, working with one of our staff that knows every single document that you would need to start an organization. So doing research on my own through to what is needed, and then discussing with her to confirm and finalize what is needed. All those things will be in the feasibility study, but there are multiple documents that would be required, and then there's other documents that would be recommended maybe later on down the road. But all of those things were discussed with someone in our organization that is in charge of that and knows it very well. So just know that when I'm speaking or Keegan's speaking, we're not the only two that are behind some of this research that we are doing right now. We are also doing research on different corporations that could potentially support a school district a foundation in your district. And so all of those things, again, will be on the report. And then all the surveys that you have been doing and being part of, both pre and post meetings, all really help guide what this foundation will be. And they're all really important. And I want to echo Dave and Joe and their appreciation of the time you've taken to spend with us in these meetings and individually with me. It really makes a difference, and it really helps the guidance of where this potential foundation will go. And it's just exciting to see. And I hope that it continues, that you guys continue being involved, because you are true advocates for your community.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And then also, in part of the follow-up survey that I will be sending out after our meeting today, we'll be looking for any individual school sites that have business allies or community allies that are already incorporated into the way they do business. So, and that we're providing with to Beyond Ed as well. So they have an idea of those community partnerships that are already set up. And prior to this meeting this week, I've been collecting the information from our principals as well to kind of inform that work as we move forward.
Okay, next slide.
I think that's it. So I don't know, the feasibility study. So we are planning for Beyond Education to present that completed feasibility study at the August 2021 board meeting. That's the presentation.
Yeah, so if there's any questions or comments from the stakeholders, is there any questions that we can answer at this time?
I have a question. Once the recommendation is presented to the board, what would be the next steps? If there is a decision to move forward, what is the next step?
So it's limited what the district can be involved in, and I'll let Mr. Winkart explain what our limitations are from a district standpoint, because we're dealing with public funds. So Mr. Winkart, can you assist us with that?
With the feasibility study, then the next step would be, if the Board of Education or the Board of Trustees of the school district is supportive, then the core group that's interested in moving forward with the foundation would start to organize and meet. We put together a articles of incorporation and bylaws, if not able to use the ones from the prior foundation. And I sent out a sample of those bylaws a few weeks ago to the Beyond Ed and to the district. But those can be modified to meet the needs of the foundation as it forms, particularly with respect to the number of members on the board of directors, that type of thing, so that it's consistent with the mission and goals. So the next step would be for the interested community members to start to organize and start to move forward with organizing the foundation, establishing the articles of incorporation, establishing the bylaws and so on, and getting volunteers to start to form the foundation and set your mission, set your goals, your vision, and decide what the priorities of the foundation is going to be.
So what we could do as a district would be, we could make our classrooms, we could make some classrooms available, some of our facilities available to have such a meeting. We could exchange information with you of everything that we know. What Mr. Rinkart talked about in detail. So then that way the foundation would be at a point where the key leaders would be at a point that you wouldn't have to do that research yourself. We would provide you everything that we know. So then that way we could assist the foundation to start moving in a direction to be active. But from our standpoint, we could not support any more meetings, any more discussions. We could exchange information, but then at that point, it's upon the foundation to, start with the activities to, to take the necessary actions to be active.
Thank you.
So from the board perspective, our perspective, I don't think we even really vote on anything. I'm assuming it's going to be an information item because what we voted on was to spend the money to pay for Beyond Ed to do this study, which is providing all of this data to the potential new foundation members, so that they can then take that data and go with it and not have to start from scratch. And that's what we voted on. But from here on out, we won't have an action item. It will basically be what happened here and where is that information going from here. And I'm assuming it's going to be going to whoever that core group is that wants to take it and go.
You're exactly right, Mrs. Erickson. It would be, the report could also serve as a foundation, as a supporting information for the foundation to use that data how it deemed appropriate to assist its operations.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And sometimes it's more important to know what you don't know, right, than what you do know. So with the work that's being done, it's giving the foundation a great assistance, because then you don't need to spend your resources figuring out those things or figuring out that data, because we've been able to do this legally through this process with the support of our legal counsel, with the support of Beyond Ed, and with the support of our board to approve that agreement. So at this point, we would be able to hand over all our information over to the foundation and to the stakeholders of the foundation, so that way they could, work on the next steps of the progress of the process without having to spend time or resources to figure out the things that we've already discovered as a group. Mrs. Weisenberg?
As I'm looking at this participants list, that just leaves Nicole, me, and Amy, because the rest of you are all district people. Is that true?
Well, for today's list,
we did have some people that couldn't make it because of vacations or prior engagements. So we are recording it, but we have several people on the list that will be receiving this that aren't part of OUSD, are employed by OUSD.
So if you think of this feasibility study as kind of a guide, it should be a good guide for how to move forward, where the business connections might be, where, what the fundraising needs might be, what the program needs might be. So I'm assuming that the feasibility study will be a big help in that regard.
And we could be, Mr. Irvin and I could be available in the future to help elaborate and answer any questions of the report after the board receives the report, to provide some insight since the two of us were, key participants in the process. So we'll be happy to work with whomever the group is assembled in providing some feedback and answers. Mrs. Weisenberg, do you have another question?
No, I just didn't put my hand down. Sorry.
There were quite a few other people though identified. You said around 7 that were. So don't feel like you all got snookered into this. Here you are. Thank you. Because there are other. I know Janet Kwan indicated she's very interested and she's got a lot of experience. And was David Imboden potentially?
Yep. And
somebody
Carrie Lindell.
And Carrie Lindell. And then I think even Tiger Cosmos may have indicated.
Yes,
so
he was on the list.
They're just
Christina
not on the
Kendler.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have lots of people. I know that because of school ending, people wanted to go on their vacation. So we recorded this and we'll get this out. And we really want to collect input from everyone because we don't know all of the people that are out there. We don't know what we don't know. There's a lot of people out there that want to be more engaged, and we need to start looking for those people to help engage them.
Connie Smith, I don't know if anybody reached out to Connie Smith, retiring principal, but she was really active over at Tustin Public Schools Foundation. And she indicated she would be like to potentially play a role. And she seems like she'd be a big asset.
Absolutely. I'll put her on the list. So following up this meeting, I'll send out another survey. If you can include anyone you think might be interested, I'll kind of delineate some of those opportunities. And then also any community or business partnerships that you're aware of with the school sites that you're associated with. That will help us basically complete this portion of the report. And I'll get that out first thing tomorrow.
And then could you also send us, I don't know who the current board members are. I know that Christina Kendler's on the board, but is there, like, who's the board president? And
that I don't, who would have that information?
Mr. Winkart.
Okay.
Joe Greenwald is the current president, and Cindy Olivier is, I believe, the treasurer, and I believe Christina Kindler is the secretary. And I was vice president and then wasn't once I got elected. So there was only 4 of us. There were 4 officers, and that's who it was.
And are Joe and Cindy still interested in continuing?
I don't know. I don't. I mean, they'll definitely be there for the transition and are happy to do that. You also had Larry Cohn, but he lives in Nevada now. Denise Biddle, who I don't know what her interest is. And I think there was one more person. And they were kind of like our advisors. They were the former officers and they sort of stuck around. So, there's a few people out there like that.
We can confirm it, but I believe everyone who was on the foundation, we invited to participate in this process. But we'll verify that information.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Winkart, after the board receives the report as an information item, do you have any concerns for us to have one last meeting of this type with this committee to share the report and answer any further questions that may come up as a result of the report?
Oh, no, I think that would be fine. And I think if we could involve the people who are on the board of directors of the current foundation or contact them so we can maybe have a transition rather than having to start a new foundation from scratch, that would be very helpful. We haven't been able to locate a copy of the bylaws of the current foundation. We have the articles of incorporation, but not the bylaws. So, if we could get a hold of the bylaws, there's usually in the bylaws, there's a procedure for electing new members of the board of directors. So we could use that bylaws to have a transition. Use that.
Did you reach out to Christina Did you reach out to Christina Kindler? Because I think at the last meeting, she indicated that she could get them for you. So I'm not sure
okay.
if you had emailed her or not.
No,
Yeah, we'll follow up on that.
okay, I'll get that from Dave and we'll follow up.
Awesome.
Okay, any other questions we can answer? Okay,
Well, thank you. I want to say thank you to our Beyond Ed partners, and thank you, Dave, for coordinating this meeting. There's a lot that's come out of this, and I think we have some ideas and some actions to move forward. So I want to thank everyone for their input. I've been listening. I've been trying not to talk too much because I want to make sure that those of you that are vested in this are able to give input to the process. So thank you for that.
well, this concludes our meeting. Again, I am deeply honored to be working with you on this project and the investment of your time and commitment again to support our students. It's been so invaluable. And we will be in contact with you and be following up. Mr. Irvin and I will be following up with the information that was requested and scheduling at a future meeting. And maybe when time allows, we can actually see each other in person. Hopefully we'll be at a point that we can start getting back to normal. That would be nice. I know virtual meetings are convenient, but sometimes you just like to see people. So hopefully that we'll be at that point sometime soon. So that concludes our meeting, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.